Good morning and welcome back to Advanced Composition with Professor Kent Lee. First, let me just mention one thing. I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time. For your essays, you should mainly be finding and citing English sources, good quality English sources. If you really have to cite a source that's in another language, how do you reference that? Of course, in the in-text citation, you're going to write the author's name in English letters and English spelling. And then the references. Whether it's APA, Chicago, MLA, it will look something kind of like this. First, let's say it's another language that uses the Latin or Roman alphabet. Well, in that case, you would do it like this. You would put the original title. Here's a German example. And then in brackets, you would put in English translation, in square brackets in English translation. That would be for titles of articles and probably for names of journals, titles of journals in books. If it is a language such as Korean, Chinese, Russian that does not use the Latin alphabet, uses a different writing system, there are two ways of doing it. The more informal way is like this. If your audience likely knows the language also, you could probably, in the reference, put the title in the original language, like this, in Korean or Chinese, Russian writing system, etc. And then put the translation in square brackets after that. And again, for titles of articles and names of periodic academic journals. If it is for an international audience, if it's a more formal context, you're writing a formal manuscript for publication in a journal, for example, or an international periodical, if the audience might not know the language, then instead you would Romanize the titles. You would convert it to Latin spelling, like this, and then put a translation in square brackets after that. For titles of articles, titles of periodicals, and titles of journals. Again, if it's a really famous popular publication, a popular magazine, you probably don't need to translate it. But if it's a specific publication, especially in an academic journal, you would need to translate the title of that publication. Of course, book titles you would translate also. So that's basically how you do foreign references. Again, this is in my book. I think this is also, there's a little bit on my website. If you are translating Korean names into APA, I think go to my book or my website for a little tips on how to do that too. Today I would like to share some tips on finding sources, especially for your essay assignments. Some of you are doing topics maybe related to higher education. I'm going to show you in my browser. If your topic involves higher education, university education, some issue of higher education, well, let me show you a couple of sites that might be good for you. And these are some of the sites I'm going to show you, like these are more professional quality sites. They're not heavy academic sites. They're not popular sources. These are what I would call professional sources. So I'm going to search in Google for some of these. First one is Chronicle of Higher Education. If you are doing a search on Chronicle, if you just search Google for this Chronicle of Higher Education, you'll find this website. It is about academic news. It's particularly focused on North America. If you are interested in something about North American, especially U.S. Academic happenings, what's going on in higher education in the U.S. Now, for a more global perspective, Times Higher Education is a good source of information on what's happening in higher education, university education around the world, including happenings and controversies and such. And you see here is a lot about higher education, some in the US, but also around the world. And here we see a lot about the impact of COVID-19 right now. So those are good sources. There are a few other sources like this you could probably find if you are writing a paper about higher education issues. A few of you are dealing with business issues, business-related issues, maybe including gender equality in the workplace. So I've mentioned this before, the Harvard Business Review, and my Google settings are in German, sorry, but Harvard Business Review. We see, again, a lot of stuff about COVID-19. You scroll down here, and there's actually a lot of articles, and they have had quite a few articles on diversity in the workplace, includes gender issues and things like that. And it's not all focused on the US, there's a lot of global focus as well. Maybe another one is The Economist. It's a more professional level magazine, theeconomist.com, and they have a lot of articles on various global business issues and economic issues, not just the US, of course. Now, they do tend to want you to subscribe in order to have access to a lot of articles. You might get 5 free articles, perhaps, and a lot of even some better peer articles do that. New York Times, Washington Post, of course, are also good places to go, or good newspapers like that in your country to find. If you are talking about language education issues, well, let me show you a good one to go to. English Today. Let's scroll down and find it. It's published by Cambridge. It's kind of an academic journal, but it's not as heavy. The articles tend to be relatively short and written in a more readable style. I would say it's kind of in between professional and academic quality sometimes. They are scholarly articles, but they are generally not heavy, heavy research articles. It's a lot more like policy, language education policy. And they have a lot of articles about language education in East Asian countries. It's pretty much about English education around the world, including policy issues. You see here on the website there's something about China, there's something about EMI, English Medium Instruction, or Yonggong policy, for example, where universities in Korea or China make you take courses that are taught in English and make the professors teach the courses in English, even though it's not a language class. It could be a history class or a chemistry class or a philosophy class. There are quite a few articles in this journal about language education in East Asian countries. A lot of it may focus on college education, but I'm sure there is some stuff on secondary education. So English Today is a good source. Now, moving on to somewhat more academic stuff. If you're a college student and you haven't really gotten into heavy research stuff yet, which you probably haven't, I would not really recommend that you try searching for really heavy scientific research articles. Basic rule: anytime you're using an article, a source for an essay, for a research paper that you're writing or an essay that you're writing, you should always use articles that you can understand, things you can read, and where you can understand most of the stuff. Don't cite anything that you don't really understand. If you can at least read, research articles tend to have like an introduction, then what's called a literature review. They review some of the other research on the topic. And you might have like the real meaty research section. It might say experiment or research, and that section might be heavy for a lot of you. But after that, there's probably a discussion section where they discuss the results of the research and what they mean for their research question. If you can understand at least that part, then probably fine. If you can't understand maybe the research methods section, maybe okay. But if you can understand the introduction and the literature review where they critique other research on the topic, and especially if you can understand the discussion section where they discuss what their findings mean and the implications of their findings for the topic. If you can understand that, then fine, you can use it. So let me start with something that's probably easier to understand in terms of academic articles. There are kind of your upper level international journals. And those are the ones that you might have trouble understanding. And then there are kind of maybe somewhat lower mid-level articles in international journals that are not quite as prestigious, not quite as heavy. You might be able to understand some of those. And then kind of the stuff that's published domestically. For example, in Korea, stuff that's published in Korea, and the research that's published by academic journals in Korea, the articles might be in Korean or in English. It depends on the journal. Some of those articles, especially if they're in English, again for my class, I want you to get stuff that's in English. Those are what we call KCI, Korean Citation Index articles, KCI journals. That kind of stuff you might be able to understand, especially if it's in language education, applied linguistics, literature, teaching, research, things like that. Literature analysis, things like that you might be able to understand. So the best source for that stuff, it's academic research. It's published in Korea by kind of local, domestic Korean research organizations. The place to go, the search engine for that is RIS. So we'll go to RIS. And you see the link here, ris.co.kr. It's sending me pop-ups. So this is a search engine for Korean published articles. It might also index stuff by Koreans in universities overseas. Let's say I want pronunciation pedagogy. So I'll search here in RIS, and it breaks them down into different categories. You want to make sure you get stuff that is that are actual research articles. You see like KCI, 등재, things like that. Make sure that these are published research articles. You don't want someone's PhD dissertation, a 박사 논문, because if you cite that, you're pretending that you actually read and understand a 300-page doctoral dissertation, a doctoral thesis, which I don't think you would have time for. If you're a college student, probably it's above your head. Don't get a master's thesis, a 석사 논문, because that's, as we discussed before, that's someone's preliminary research project, and you can't be sure that it's really good quality. So there are a number of sources here. You mainly want to get stuff that's published in academic research journals. It might give you results from academic conferences, and those are preliminary research studies often. It's better to get something that's published in a research journal as an article and get the article. Now, let's say you want to go for some more international stuff that's published in English internationally. Let's say, for example, if I'm interested in language acquisition, and I just do a regular Google search, again, I'm going to get Wikipedia, I'm going to get, I might get some academic stuff, but a lot of it is like kind of common reference articles, or okay, Khan Academy, it's not bad, but it's not, what you would want for a research essay. It's going to give you a lot of other stuff. How about grammaticality judgment test? At the top here, it's actually giving me a link to, this says scientific articles on grammaticality judgment tests. That's what we're going to go for in a minute. But it gives me a lot of stuff. Now, if I type in something like English pronunciation, like that. I mean, a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of kind of popular sources, and there's anybody who's put up a blog or website on this kind of stuff, which may or may not be useful, but a lot of this stuff is not really research oriented. It might be stuff by teachers for students, but if you're doing a research article, it's not what you want. So what you want to do is you want to go to Google Scholar. So again, my results are coming up in German, but because my Google settings are in German, just for fun. Let's say I want to do grammaticality judgment tasks. Okay, so here is a search for grammaticality judgment tasks. Grammaticality judgment task, by the way, is a tool that we use in linguistics research for kind of assessing how people judge something. Do they judge this as grammatical or ungrammatical? As a way of getting their intuitions about what native speakers think about something, or non-native speakers of English, language learners, what they think at different stages. It's a kind of tool that we use. So here we have various articles that are coming up and some links. It says, well, I'm on a campus network, so Google knows where you are. Google knows everything about you. So if you're on a campus network, it's going to find a link at your university library. So you see here, find it at PKNU, or in this case, here's a direct link to a website at Georgetown University. Let's take a look at these. Our university library, and click here for the maybe a link to the university library's copy that they have. And the university subscribes to this journal, so I can get the paper here. In this case, this is a PDF on a website at a university. That's nice. Scroll down here. Sometimes you have direct links, sometimes find it at PKNU. Here's one, and I don't have a link to anything. Let's see if I want this. I can click here on different versions of the article. Here I'm getting an abstract, and it's showing me an abstract, a summary of the article, and that's it. Probably if I click on get access, ooh, 20 pounds. Okay, I've hit what's called a paywall. They want me to pay money to get the article. No, I think I will talk about that later, because it really angers me when this happens, and it happens a lot. If it happens, if you really need the article, maybe find a friend at another university who has access. Email the authors. The authors will be happy to share it with you usually. They want to get cited. Or here I clicked on similar articles, and I don't see any other links to the articles. Sometimes if I click on similar articles in Google Scholar, I might get a copy of it, but not here. So I've hit a paywall. So later I'll say more about what to do when you run into a paywall. Now let me do another search for something else. Let's say I have age of acquisition. Age of acquisition. So here, that's a term refers to when you learn a particular language structure or a particular word or set of words. Age of acquisition. Now, if I'm getting a lot of less relevant links, there are two things I can do. I can force Google to search for the exact phrase by putting it into quotation marks. Quotation marks. Now, if I'm also not getting the of, and I really want that phrase age of acquisition, if that were the case, I'm getting it here, but if I want to force it to search for a minor word, I can put a plus in front of a minor word. Sometimes Google will ignore minor words like of, and if that's really important, you want to force it to search for of, put a plus sign in front of it to force it to search for a word like that. So I'm making it search for that. Let's say I can also refine the search. Age of acquisition Spanish. Here I'm getting a lot of links here on various things. Nice. Anyway, it might give you, you might come up, it might bring some books, links to books that Google has scanned. Google has scanned almost every book there is from a major publisher. If it brings you to a book link and you open the link to that book, you probably have access only to a few pages or part of the book, not the whole book usually. So, and again, a whole book for an essay, if you don't have much time, is probably not a great idea anyway. Anyway, language acquisition. So again, if I were getting maybe non-PDF links like documents, see, Google Scholar works by indexing university websites and the websites of academic publishers. Publishers, big publishing companies like Elsevier and Routledge and Springer in Europe, which most of them are in the US and Europe, companies that specialize in academic publishing. So Google Scholar limits its searches to those kinds of websites. You might come across a document file, somebody's unpublished manuscript, maybe they're going to publish it, maybe they haven't gotten around to it, and you may not want that. You have to kind of be able to judge if it's really good or not, and you're probably not able to unless you're a graduate student. What I can do is I can minus file type doc. So doc is a Word file, or so minus means to exclude something, or I type in file type PDF, which means I only want PDFs, and it's going to give me PDFs. Nonetheless, it's giving me a book link here. Let's see what this is. It's a book link on a linguistics website. So you can use file type to limit the search to just PDFs. Let's say I know there was somebody at the University of Illinois who did research on this that I liked. I don't remember the person's name. I'm going to go illinois.edu, so that limits it to stuff on the particular website, University of Illinois website. Limiting my search. I can, let's say I'm looking for reading models. I'm going to type it in quotes. In psychology, reading models, psychological models that explain how people read, or the linguistic and mental processes involved in reading. Now, let's see here, I've got connectionist models of reading, and I like connectionism. It's an interesting kind of psychological theory or model for learning. But at this moment, I don't really want that. I want something that's more about reading models for maybe teaching or classrooms. So minus connectionism, which will exclude results. So the minus will exclude results on connectionism, because I don't want that right now. Maybe I want reading models and pedagogy. I can also combine things. But I don't want connectionism. I don't want connectionist models. So there are all kinds of neat things you can do with these Google searches, the search syntax. See here on the left of the screen, you can also limit the time frames. You can choose those options for limiting your time, when it was published, and things like that. Okay, some other things you can, under a particular item, let's see here. When we have here all three versions, I can click on other references or indices of that article. Similar articles, I can maybe have it search for similar articles. And then cited by, this means cited by, so I can also search for other articles that have cited this article. That might help me to search for some similar stuff. Now, here's an important tip. Quotation marks. I click on that and it gives me the citation. and it gives it to me in MLA and APA format. If you are using a program like Microsoft EndNote, you can download it from this, or if you're not, you can copy and paste the citation, at least the APA citation or the MLA citation. Oftentimes it gives me the Chicago citation too. It's not working here. I can copy and paste this into my essay, or I can click download it into my EndNote or some other citation manager software here. And that's how you can get citations. Now be careful, sometimes the citation information in Google Scholar is not always complete. So you have to watch out for that. You might have to hunt down missing information. It's more often with minor publications that some information is less complete if it's published by a lesser known publishing company, for example. Some information might not be complete. Okay, if you really need an article and it's behind a paywall, all right, let's talk about a real moral problem, an ethical problem in academic publishing. The paywalls. These academic publishers are greedy and they've got a bad reputation, especially a couple of the big ones in the US. They want to charge you a lot of money. If you're a student, you can't afford to pay that much money for an article that you might or might not need. Maybe you can't be sure unless you actually get the article and read it and then realize, oh, I don't need it. Charging $20 or £20 or €20 for an article is absolutely ridiculous, especially because how is most research done? The people who do this research, they are professors, sometimes or many times PhD students. Who's paying for the research? They are using university facilities, often research grant money from universities, and often research grant money from governments. Essentially, the research is directly or indirectly paid for by university funds and the tuition money that students pay, and or public funds. Well, some kind of public funds, either tuition or public monies. The universities get public money, as well as, and the researchers often get public money. They get grant money from government agencies. They get grant money from universities, or they're using university resources. This stuff is paid for through public funds, the research. But if I publish a paper, I write up my manuscript and I send it to one of these big greedy academic publishers, I sign the rights over to the publisher. They own it. They own the copyright. I don't. They get to charge money. If someone pays money for that article, I don't get any money. The publishing company gets to keep the money, which is wrong. And especially in the US and the EU, especially in the US, the laws need to change because this is a serious problem. And it's a serious problem when professors can't access research articles too. Let me show you a trick. Some people are going to say what I'm going to show you is unethical. What the academic publishers are doing is unethical. You can find, let me search for Sci-Hub. Now, make sure there's a hyphen or a dash in there, because there is a website that uses the name Sci-Hub for something else. They move around a lot, but basically they have pirated copies of a lot of published research articles. I think currently they are hosted at the Taiwan address and a couple of others. You can go to Sci-Hub, put in a DOI, that's a reference number, or the URL, or the title of the article, preferably an exact title, and Sci-Hub can probably get the article for you. They have pirated copies of thousands and thousands of research articles from all kinds of research journals, and some people will say this is not ethical, it's stealing, but what the academic publishers are doing is not ethical. And Sci-Hub is a backdoor around that. And yes, a lot of professors use Sci-Hub. I know. I'm not the only one. A lot of people use Sci-Hub. to get around these paywalls. Until the laws change, especially in the US, we are going to have to rely on Sci-Hub for our research. So if you ever are in that situation, don't be afraid to use Sci-Hub. If your particular browser complains, use a different browser. Tips that I've shown you work for Google Scholar. They work for regular Google searches. All the tips I've shown you today, the search tips, the search syntax. The search syntax also works in your Gmail account. If you've got 10,000 emails in your inbox and you need to find that one email, these search tips work for your Gmail, for regular Google, and then for Google Scholar. So I hope that helps you with your essay and finding sources for your essay. Probably next time we're going to start into the next unit, which has to do with genre analysis. So genre refers to type of writing, and here specifically the type of academic writing that is done in a particular field. So what I'm going to want you to do is to find one or two articles, maybe scholarly articles from a particular field, like a particular class you're taking. Let's say you're taking a course in American poetry, British poetry. Get a couple of scholarly articles, maybe articles you're reading in your course. We're going to use those. I'm going to have you use those and refer to those. You're taking a course in sociolinguistics. You're taking a course in literary theory, or a course in language acquisition, or a course in phonology. As long as it's an article you can understand. I want you to find a couple of research articles or scholarly articles from one very particular area that you're studying, maybe one of your classes. And next time we are going to start, maybe not jumping on the article itself, maybe I'll have you start referring to one of those articles next week, so you have some time to prepare that. So to prepare for that though, we're going to talk about some important background concepts. Before I start having you analyze the style of writing in one particular field of study, we are going to talk about some important background concepts. We're going to talk about important concepts in academic English, academic language, terminology or nomenclature, the kinds of terminology used in a particular field. And we are going to talk about some really important words like theory and model. And what do those mean? When we talk about the word theory in science or in linguistics or literature studies, what do we mean by theory? We're going to talk about that in the next few sessions. So that's it for today. Good luck on your midterm essays, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.